Admiral Zexhai of the Galactic Consortium had witnessed the death of civilizations. He had watched entire species kneel before the might of the Consortium fleet, their proud warriors reduced to whimpering slaves in a matter of hours. In his 3 centuries of service, he had never encountered a situation that couldn't be resolved with overwhelming force and the cold application of superior technology. Today, however, as he stared at the tactical display aboard his flagship Eternal Dominion, he found himself experiencing something he hadn't felt in decades: uncertainty. The human vessel hung in space before his assembled fleet like a splinter of defiance against the cosmic order. It was small, laughably so compared to his battleships. Where his flagship stretched nearly 2 kilometers from bow to stern, bristling with enough firepower to crack a planet's crust, the human ship appeared to be barely 300 meters in length. Its hull was a dull gray, unmarked by the ceremonial insignia that adorned proper warships. It looked more like an industrial vessel than a military craft. Status report: Zexhai commanded, his 4 arms manipulating the holographic interface with practiced efficiency. His species, the Vorthan, had evolved for command, multiple limbs for multitasking, eyes that could process dozens of data streams simultaneously, and a neural structure optimized for tactical thinking. It was why the Consortium had elevated them to positions of authority throughout the galaxy. 237 vessels in formation, Admiral, reported his tactical officer, Commander Drixnell. All weapon systems are charged and ready. Gravitational containment fields are active. The human ship is completely surrounded, and yet it hasn't surrendered. Zexai's voice carried a note of irritation. The humans were a newly contacted species. Their first documented encounter with Consortium forces had occurred only 6 months ago. They should have been in awe of the technological superiority before them, not sitting motionless in what could only be interpreted as an act of defiance. The human ship, designation unknown, as it wasn't broadcasting any identification, had appeared at the edge of the Kepler 442 system 3 days ago. The system contained a Consortium mining operation on the 4th planet, staffed by Thraxian workers and overseen by Consortium administrators. It was a minor operation, hardly worthy of a full fleet response, but the humans had specifically requested access to the system. Not requested, demanded. The message had been brief and had arrived through standard diplomatic channels. The Consortium will evacuate all personnel and equipment from the Kepler 442 system within 72 hours. Non-compliance will result in forcible removal. Zexhai had initially assumed it was some sort of translation error. New species often struggled with the nuances of galactic diplomacy. But when pressed for clarification, the human response had been even more direct. You have 68 hours remaining. That had been when the Consortium decided to remind these upstart humans of their place in the galactic hierarchy. Admiral, the communications officer called out, her voice tight with concentration. We're receiving another transmission from a human vessel. Put it through. Zexhai settled back in his command throne, prepared to hear the inevitable surrender. No species could look upon the assembled might of 200 Consortium warships and maintain their defiance. The voice that filled the bridge was calm, almost conversational. It spoke in accented galactic standard, the words carefully pronounced, but carrying an underlying tension that suggested barely restrained emotion. Consortium Admiral, this is Captain Sarah Chun of the Earth ship Perseverance. You have been given ample time to comply with our lawful request. Your mining operation is extracting resources from a planet that contains the remains of a human colony. We are here to collect our dead and return them home for proper burial. We will not be deterred from this mission. Zexhai felt his crest flatten against his skull, a sign of extreme displeasure among his species. Open a channel, he commanded. Captain Chun, I am Admiral Zexhai of the Consortium 3rd Fleet. You are outnumbered more than 200 to 1. Your vessel is surrounded by enough firepower to sterilize a star system. I strongly suggest you reconsider your position. The response came immediately, without any pause for consideration. Admiral Zexhai, we appreciate your concern for our safety. However, our position is not subject to reconsideration. The colonists on Kepler 442b died 3,000 years ago when their terraforming equipment failed. They died believing that someday their people would come for them. We're here to fulfill that promise. 3,000 years. Zexai felt a ripple of confusion. Captain, 3,000 years ago, humans hadn't even achieved faster-than-light travel, according to our records. How could you have had a colony in this system? Your records are incomplete, Admiral. The colony ship New Horizon departed Earth in the year 2157. It carried 50,000 volunteers and enough equipment to terraform a marginally habitable world. They knew it would be a one-way journey. They knew they might not live to see their new home become truly livable. But they believed their sacrifice would mean something. The bridge fell silent as the implications of the humans' words sank in. Zexai accessed the historical database, cross-referencing the timeline. 3,000 years ago, the consortium was still consolidating its control over the local galactic arm. It was entirely possible that a primitive human colony ship could have made the journey without being detected. Captain Chun, Zexai said carefully, I understand your emotional attachment to this matter, but the system is now under consortium jurisdiction. Any human remains will be treated with appropriate respect, but they will remain where they are. I'm prepared to offer your species compensation for any distress this may cause. The laugh that came through the communication channel was unlike anything Zexai had heard before. It wasn't the hysterical giggle of a species facing extinction, nor the bitter cackle of the defeated. It was low, quiet, and carried an undertone that made his combat instincts twitch with unease. Admiral, I don't think you understand. We're not here to negotiate. We're not here to discuss compensation. We're here to collect our people and bring them home. Your presence in this system is an obstacle to that mission. Remove your ships, and there won't be any problems. Zexai's tactical display began showing movement indicators. The human ship was rotating slowly, bringing what appeared to be its main engine assembly to bear on the consortium formation. It was a textbook positioning for an attack run, but it made no tactical sense. One ship against 200 was suicide, regardless of the tactical positioning. Captain Chun, you're making a grave mistake. Stand down immediately, or we will be forced to open fire. Admiral Zexai, we've been talking for nearly 10 minutes now. In that time, your ships have moved into what you consider optimal firing positions. Your weapons are charged, your shields are raised, and you've even activated your gravitational containment fields. But you haven't fired. Zexai's crest rose slightly. The human was observant, disturbingly so for someone commanding what appeared to be a civilian vessel. We prefer to resolve conflicts through diplomacy when possible. That's part of it, Chin agreed. But there's something else, isn't there? Your sensors are telling you something about our ship that doesn't make sense. Something that's making your tactical officers very nervous. The Admiral glanced at his sensor station, where 3 technicians were bent over their displays in intense concentration. Commander Drixenel caught his eye and gave a subtle gesture that meant anomalous readings. It was true. Ever since the human ship had appeared, their sensors had been providing conflicting data. The vessel's mass readings fluctuated wildly. Its energy signature didn't match any known propulsion system. And, most disturbing of all, it seemed to be generating gravitational effects that should have required technology far beyond what humans possessed. Captain Chun, what exactly is your ship? She's a memorial ship, Admiral, built specifically to collect and honor those who died far from home. Every component, every system, every rivet was manufactured by families who lost someone in the dark between the stars. When you've spent 3,000 years mourning the dead, you develop very specific ideas about what it means to bring them home. The Perseverance began to accelerate, slowly at first, then with increasing speed. Zexai watched in growing alarm as his tactical display tracked the human vessel's movement. Instead of heading toward the planet where the supposed colony remains were located, it was coming directly toward his flagship. All ships, target the human vessel, Zexai commanded. Fire warning shots across their bow. The space around the Perseverance erupted in brilliant light as dozens of energy weapons discharged. The beams should have vaporized anything in their path, but as the light faded, the human ship continued its approach, apparently unharmed. Impossible, whispered the sensor technician. Admiral, the energy weapons are passing through their hull without making contact. It's as if the ship isn't entirely there. Captain Chun, Zexai said urgently, explain what we're seeing. Admiral, when humans grieve, we build monuments. When we remember the dead, we light candles. When we promise to bring someone home, we mean it literally. The Perseverance isn't just a ship, it's a promise given physical form. And promises, Admiral, are remarkably difficult things to break. The human vessel was now moving at a significant fraction of light speed, directly toward the center of the consortium formation. Zexai realized with growing horror that if it maintained its current trajectory, it would pass directly through his flagship. All ships, maximum firepower. Stop that vessel. The vacuum around the Perseverance became a hellscape of unleashed energy. Particle beams, plasma cannons, gravitational weapons, and exotic matter torpedoes all converged on the single human ship. For several seconds, the space surrounding it was too bright to observe directly, containing enough destructive force to obliterate a small moon. When the barrage ended, the human ship emerged completely unscathed. More than that, it had actually increased its speed during the attack, as if the weapon's fire had somehow provided it with additional energy. By the void, Zexai breathed. What are you? We're the people who don't abandon our dead, Admiral. And you're in our way. The Perseverance reached the edge of the consortium formation and passed through the heavy cruiser Relentless as if it were made of mist. Alarms screamed across the comm channels as the cruiser's crew reported impossible readings. The human ship had occupied the same space as their vessel for nearly 3 seconds without any physical interaction whatsoever. Admiral, Commander Drixon AL called out in panic. They're heading directly for us. Zexai watched the tactical display as the human ship approached his flagship. At the last moment, he gave the order he thought he'd never have to give in his entire military career. Evasive maneuvers. All ships, withdraw from the human vessel's path. The massive consortium battleships, each one capable of conquering entire star systems, began a desperate retreat from a single 300-meter human vessel that seemed to exist only when it chose to. As the Perseverance passed through the exact space where the Eternal Dominion had been moments before, Captain Chen's voice echoed across the fleeing fleet. Thank you for your cooperation, Admiral. We'll be collecting our people now. Please don't interfere with our work. And for the first time in 3,000 years of galactic dominance, the consortium fleet found itself following orders given by someone else. The evacuation of Kepler 442b proceeded in absolute silence. From his position at the edge of the system, Admiral Zexai watched through long-range sensors as the human ship descended to the planet's surface and began its inexplicable work. The Perseverance had somehow managed to phase through solid matter when dealing with his fleet, but it appeared to interact normally with the planetary surface and the remains of the ancient colony. Sir, Commander Drixonel reported quietly. Intelligence Division is requesting priority communication. They've been analyzing the human ship's capabilities, and they have concerns. Zexai accepted the incoming transmission without enthusiasm. Intelligence Division had a talent for transforming simple military situations into complex political nightmares. The face that appeared on his screen belonged to Director Kethvar, a Vorthan whose cybernetic modifications marked him as one of the consortium's top analysts. Admiral Zexai, we need to discuss what you've encountered. According to your tactical reports, this human vessel demonstrated abilities that violate several fundamental laws of physics. That's accurate, Director. The ship appears capable of selective intangibility. It passed through our vessels without interaction while simultaneously maintaining normal interaction with other matter. Selective intangibility, Kethvar repeated slowly. Admiral, do you understand what you're describing? The ability to choose which physical laws apply to a given object at any specific moment? That's not advanced technology. That's reality manipulation on a scale that suggests the humans have access to tools that should not exist in this universe. Zexai felt his crest flatten again. What are you saying, Director? I'm saying that if humans can build ships that ignore physical laws when convenient, then our entire understanding of their technological capabilities is fundamentally flawed. We've been treating them as a primitive species with limited industrial capacity. What if we're wrong? What if what we're seeing isn't their most advanced technology, but their most emotionally motivated? The implications of that statement settled over the bridge like a cold fog. If humans could bend reality when sufficiently motivated, what did that mean for the consortium's plans for their species? Director, You're suggesting that human emotions can somehow influence physical laws. I'm suggesting, Admiral, that we may have encountered something entirely outside our conceptual framework. The ship called itself a memorial vessel. The captain claimed it was built by families who had lost people in space. What if grief, when properly focused and supported by sufficient technological infrastructure, can actually alter the behavior of matter and energy? Before Zexai could respond, his sensor officer called out urgently, "Admiral, something's happening on the planet's surface." The main display shifted to show the surface of Kepler 442b, where the human ship had landed near what appeared to be the ruins of a settlement. The Perseverance had extended mechanical arms that were carefully excavating specific locations, but that wasn't what had caught the sensor operator's attention. The planet itself was changing. Where the human ship touched the ground, the barren, mining-scarred landscape was transforming. Dead soil was becoming rich and dark. Withered vegetation was sprouting and growing at impossible speeds. The very atmosphere seemed to be clearing, revealing a sky that grew bluer with each passing hour. "By the void," Zexai whispered. "They're not just collecting remains. They're restoring the planet." Director Kethvar's voice carried a note of alarm. "Admiral, this confirms our worst fears. If humans can restore dead worlds as a byproduct of their grief rituals, what else might they be capable of?" The communication channel crackled, and Captain Chen's voice joined the conversation uninvited. "Director Kethvar, Admiral Zexai, please forgive the interruption. We've been monitoring your communications as a matter of security." "How did you?" "Our channels are encrypted with quantum-grade security protocols," Kethvar sputtered. "Director, when you're talking about us while we're conducting a memorial service, we tend to hear it regardless of your security measures. It's not a technological capability, it's a human one. We pay attention when people are planning things that might interfere with our obligations to the dead." Zexai found his voice first. "Captain Chun, what exactly are you doing to that planet?" "We're saying goodbye properly, Admiral. The colonists who died here, they never got to see their world bloom. They never got to see the trees they planted grow tall or the streams they diverted run clear. They died believing in a future they would never witness. The least we can do is show them what their sacrifice accomplished." "But the planet was dead when we found it," Commander Drixel interjected. "Our surveys confirmed it. No significant atmosphere, no viable ecosystem, no water cycle." "Your surveys were accurate, Commander. The planet died with the colonists. But death, when properly understood, isn't always permanent. Sometimes it's just delayed fulfillment." On the surface display, more changes were becoming visible. Structures were rising from the ground, not built, but grown, as if the planet itself was remembering what it was supposed to become. Rivers appeared where none had flowed for millennia, and forests began to spread outward from the landing site in expanding circles of green. "This is impossible," Director Kethvar said flatly. "Director," Captain Chen replied patiently, "you've been ruling the galaxy for 3,000 years based on the assumption that what you call impossible defines the boundaries of reality. From our perspective, the only impossible thing is abandoning the people who believed in us. What you're doing violates conservation of energy, thermodynamic equilibrium, and basic principles of ecology," Kethvar protested. "What we're doing honors promises made by people who died, believing those promises mattered more than physics." Apparently, they were right. Admiral Zexai watched the transformation spreading across the planet's surface and felt something he hadn't experienced since his early days as a junior officer: genuine fear. Not fear of defeat in battle. He understood military threats and how to counter them. This was fear of encountering something that operated by rules he couldn't comprehend or predict. "Captain Chun, how many humans know how to do what you're doing?" "Every human knows how to do this, Admiral. What you're seeing isn't special technology or advanced training. It's just humans doing what humans do when someone they care about is in trouble. The only unusual thing about the Perseverance is that she was built by people who all cared about the same thing at the same time. All of humanity can manipulate physical laws through emotional states." Director Kethvar's voice had risen to what could only be described as panic. "Director, you're misunderstanding the relationship. We don't manipulate physical laws. Physical laws, properly understood, are expressions of care and intention. What you call gravity is really just matter caring enough about other matter to stay close. What you call chemical bonding is atoms choosing to share their existence with each other. What you call conservation of energy is the universe's way of making sure nothing important is ever truly lost. The philosophical implications of this statement sent ripples of unease through both the bridge crew and the intelligence division. If humans truly believed that physics was a manifestation of care rather than impersonal mechanical laws, and if their technology was built on that foundation. Sir, the sensor officer called out again. I'm detecting additional human ships entering the system. Admiral Zexhi's tactical display lit up with new contacts. One ship became 10, 10 became 50, and within minutes, over 300 human vessels had dropped out of hyperspace at the system's edge. Unlike the Perseverance, these ships looked like proper starships, sleek, purpose-built, and obviously military in design. Captain Shun, are those reinforcements? No, I admitted. Those are witnesses. Witnesses, when we bring someone home after a long time away, the whole family comes to welcome them back. Each of those ships represents a community that lost people in the dark between stars. They're here to make sure the colonists from Kepler 442b know they weren't forgotten. The human fleet arranged itself in a perfect sphere around the planet, each ship maintaining exact distance from every other vessel. As they took their positions, something impossible began to happen to the space around Kepler 442b. Light began to bend. Not the simple gravitational lensing that occurred around massive objects, but something far more complex and beautiful. The light from the system's star began to form patterns, spirals, and geometric forms that seemed to convey meaning beyond mere illumination. The effect spread outward from the planet until the entire inner system was filled with light that moved like living calligraphy across the vacuum. When the void is that? Commander Drixenel asked, his voice barely above a whisper. That, Captain Shin replied with unmistakable pride, is 300 communities saying welcome home in a language that doesn't require words. The colonists on Kepler 442b spent 3,000 years wondering if anyone remembered them. We're making sure they know the answer. Director Kethvar's voice crackled through the communication system, tight with something approaching hysteria. Admiral, this isn't technology. This is organized reality revision on a scale that suggests humans can rewrite fundamental constants through collective emotional consensus. If they're doing this for their dead, what might they do for their living? Admiral Zexhi had spent 3 centuries studying military strategy, tactics, and the projection of force across galactic distances. He understood orbital mechanics, energy weapon efficiency curves, and the logistics of managing interstellar supply chains. What he was witnessing now fell outside every category of knowledge he possessed. Captain Shun, he said carefully, I need to ask you a direct question, and I hope you'll answer honestly. Of course, Admiral. Is what we're witnessing, the ship that phases through matter, the planet restoration, the light patterns, is this normal for human space operations? The pause that followed was long enough that Zexhi began to wonder if the communication channel had failed. When Captain Chun finally responded, her voice carried a note of surprise. Admiral, you're asking if humans normally care enough about their dead to bend reality in order to honor them? The answer is yes. The unusual thing about today isn't what we're doing. It's that we're doing it in front of people who think caring is somehow optional. And as Admiral Zexhi watched 300 human ships turn a star system into a memorial service that violated everything he thought he knew about the universe, he began to understand that the consortium had made a fundamental error in its assessment of humanity. They had mistaken human restraint for human limitation. The emergency session of the consortium High Council convened 18 hours after the Kepler 442 incident, but Director Kethvar had been analyzing data for most of that time without sleep. The holographic displays surrounding the council chamber showed tactical readouts, sensor data, and, most disturbing of all, footage of the human memorial service that had somehow transformed an entire star system into something that defied classification. High Counselor Vexera, eldest of the Vorthan leadership caste, examined the reports with the methodical precision that had kept the consortium stable for 3 millennia. Her 12 cybernetic implants processed information streams that would overwhelm unmodified beings, but Even she seemed shaken by what the data revealed. Director Kethvar, she said finally, your preliminary report suggests that humanity possesses technological capabilities that approach what our ancestors would have called magic. I trust you have a more scientific explanation. Hi, Counselor. I've spent the last day trying to develop one. Our best theoretical physicists have examined the data, and their conclusions are unsettling. Kethvar manipulated the holographic interface, displaying a three-dimensional model of the human ship's passage through Admiral Zexhi's fleet. The human vessel didn't use any conventional technology to achieve intangibility. Instead, it appears to have selectively modified the fundamental forces governing particle interaction. Meaning they somehow convinced the electromagnetic force to stop applying to their ship's hull. They didn't override physical laws. They convinced those laws to make an exception. Counselor Drixcole of the Engineering Guild leaned forward, his mechanical appendages clicking with agitation. Director, you're describing something that would require control over the basic constants that govern reality itself. Such technology would make its possessors essentially omnipotent. That's exactly what I'm describing, Counselor. And the most disturbing part is that the humans don't seem to view it as technology at all. They treat it as a natural expression of emotional commitment. High Counselor Vexthera accessed additional data streams, her implants humming as they processed terabytes of intelligence reports. What do we know about human industrial capabilities? Could they build more ships like this Perseverance? That's where our understanding becomes truly inadequate, Kethvar admitted. Our original surveys of human space identified approximately 800 inhabited worlds, with a total population of nearly 50 billion individuals. We classified their technology level as roughly equivalent to early galactic age, faster-than-light travel, basic energy weapons, primitive AI systems. Nothing to suggest they could build reality manipulation devices. And now we realize we may have been observing deliberate technological restraint rather than actual limitations. If humans can restore dead worlds as a side effect of grieving, what might they be capable of when they're actually trying to accomplish something? The chamber fell silent as the implication sank in. The consortium's entire military strategy was based on technological superiority. If humans possessed technology that was essentially magical in its capabilities, then 3,000 years of galactic dominance might be coming to an end. Director, Counselor Vexthera said slowly, in your professional assessment, do the humans represent a threat to consortium security? High Counselor, I believe we're asking the wrong question. The question isn't whether humans represent a threat, it's whether we represent a threat to them, and what they might do about it. Before anyone could respond, the chamber's communication system activated without authorization. Captain Chen's voice filled the space, carrying the same calm courtesy that had so unnerved Admiral Zexhi. High Counselor Vexthera, Counselors, Director Kethvar, please forgive the intrusion. We've been monitoring your discussion and felt it was important to provide some clarification. How did you? Counselor Drixcole began, but Captain Chun continued smoothly. How do we access your secured communication systems? Counselor, we're currently conducting a memorial service for 50,000 people who died believing that someone would come for them. When humans are honoring that kind of faith, we become very good at reaching the people we need to talk to. Captain Chun, High Counselor Vexthera said carefully, you're speaking to the governing body of the Galactic Consortium. Your security protocols are based on the assumption that information wants to be contained. From our perspective, information wants to be shared, especially when it might prevent misunderstandings that could lead to unfortunate outcomes. Director Kethvar leaned forward, his analytical mind focusing on the implications of the human statement. Captain, are you saying that human technology is based on fundamentally different assumptions about how reality operates? Director, we're saying that what you call technology is really just applied caring. When humans build something, we don't start with materials and energy, we start with the question of what we're trying to protect or honor or help. The materials and energy arrange themselves accordingly. That's impossible, Counselor Drixcole stated flatly. Counselor, with respect, you've been saying that word a lot lately. How's that been working out for you? The chamber's displays suddenly shifted, showing real-time imagery from human space. What the consortium saw defied every assumption they had made about human capabilities. The 800 worlds they had cataloged were indeed inhabited by humans, but what they were doing on those worlds was beyond anything in Consortium experience. Entire planets were covered with structures that seemed to grow rather than being built. Cities that looked more like living organisms than engineering projects. Ships that moved through space with the fluid grace of sea creatures rather than the mechanical precision of technological vessels. And everywhere, evidence of technology that treated physical laws as suggestions rather than absolute constraints. "By the void," whispered Counselor Drixcole. "How long have they been like this?" "Counselor," Captain Shin replied, "humans have been like this since we first looked up at the stars and decided that the darkness between them was just another distance to cross. What you're seeing isn't advanced technology. It's what happens when a species spends its entire evolutionary history learning to care for things that are far away or hard to reach." "But your initial contact protocols," Director Kethvar protested. "When we first encountered human ships 6 months ago, they used conventional technology. Basic FTL drives, standard hull materials, primitive weapons systems." "Director, those were our diplomatic vessels. When we meet new species, we've learned that it's better to start with technology they can understand and work up to the more complex concepts gradually. Unfortunately, you initiated hostilities before we could complete the introduction process." High Counselor Vexthera felt a cold realization settling in her enhanced consciousness. "Captain Chun, when you say initiated hostilities, what specifically are you referring to?" "High Counselor, 6 months ago, Consortium forces attacked and destroyed 3 human vessels in the Proxima Centauri system. The official report classified it as a regrettable first contact incident involving primitive aliens who failed to respond appropriately to Consortium authority." The chamber fell absolutely silent. The Proxima Centauri incident had been a minor footnote in Consortium military reports. 3 small vessels of unknown origin had been destroyed when they failed to comply with standard surrender protocols. It had been filed away as routine enforcement of galactic order. "Those ships," Vexthera said slowly, "were human diplomatic vessels. They were crewed by volunteers from the Human Diplomatic Corps. 12 families lost people that day. 12 families who believed that peaceful contact with new species was important enough to risk their lives for." "Captain Shun," Director Kethvar said urgently, "if humans possess the capabilities we've witnessed, why didn't you retaliate for those deaths?" "Director, we did retaliate. But our records show no human military action. Your records show no human military action because we don't approach conflict the way you do. When someone hurts our people, we don't seek to hurt them back. We seek to understand why they think hurting people is acceptable, and then we work to change their understanding." The displays around the chamber shifted again, showing data that made the Consortium leadership recoil in shock. Human ships had been present at dozens of Consortium military operations over the past 6 months, always just outside sensor range, always observing, always recording. They had witnessed the suppression of 3 rebellions, the enslavement of 2 species, and the destruction of 4 worlds that had refused to accept Consortium rule. "You've been watching us," Counselor Vexthera breathed. "We've been learning about you, trying to understand what happened to a civilization that became so powerful it forgot that power is supposed to be used to protect people, not control them." "And what have you concluded?" Director Kethvar asked, though his voice suggested he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. "We've concluded that the Galactic Consortium is a civilization in pain. You've spent 3,000 years building bigger ships and more powerful weapons because you're afraid that if you're not strong enough, someone will hurt you the way you've been hurting others. But that fear has made you into exactly the thing you were originally afraid of." The psychological analysis was so accurate that it sent ripples of unease through the assembled leadership. The early history of the Consortium was indeed rooted in defensive reactions to aggressive neighbors, but over the millennia, those defensive measures had evolved into the aggressive expansion that now define galactic politics. "What do you want from us?" High Counselor Vexthera asked finally. "We want you to remember what you were before you became afraid. We want you to build things that help people instead of things that control them. We want you to rediscover the difference between strength and force. And if we refuse..." The pause that followed was long enough for every member of the council to imagine dozens of possible threats. When Captain Chun finally, responded. Her words carried a weight that seemed to press against the walls of reality itself. High Counselor, we're not in the business of forcing people to be better than they are. We're in the business of making sure that people who genuinely want to be better get the chance to try. If the consortium chooses to continue harming others, we'll make sure the others are protected. If you choose to change, we'll help you remember how to build instead of breaking. And the memorial service at Kepler 442b will continue until we've properly honored every person who died believing in something better than fear. After that, we'll restore the world they died trying to create, and we'll invite anyone who wants to learn a different way of living to come and see what they accomplished. As the communication channel closed, the Consortium High Council found themselves facing a choice they had never expected to encounter. They could continue trying to rule the galaxy through force, knowing that they now faced an opponent who could rewrite reality through sheer moral conviction, or they could attempt something they hadn't tried in 3,000 years. They could try to deserve the power they possessed. 3 weeks after the Kepler 442 incident, the first Consortium world attempted to withdraw from the galactic government. The planet Thraxis Prime, home to nearly 4 billion beings who had served as industrial workers for the Consortium for over 2 millennia, simply announced that they were no longer accepting Consortium authority and requested human assistance in establishing an independent government. Admiral Zexhai received the orders to suppress the rebellion with grim resignation. The Consortium could not allow member worlds to simply declare independence, regardless of the human factor. If Thraxis Prime succeeded in breaking away, dozens of other worlds would follow, and the careful structure of galactic civilization would collapse into chaos. What he hadn't expected was to find human ships already in orbit around Thraxis Prime when his fleet arrived. Admiral, his sensor officer reported, I'm reading 37 human vessels in various orbital positions around the planet. They appear to be construction ships. Zexhai examined the tactical display with growing confusion. The human ships were indeed construction vessels, massive industrial platforms that were apparently engaged in building something in orbit around Thraxis Prime. But what they were building defied easy categorization. Captain Chun, he said, opening a communication channel, what exactly are you constructing here? Admiral Zexhai, came the familiar voice. It's good to hear from you again. We're building infrastructure. The Thraxians have been industrial workers for their entire recorded history, but they've never had the opportunity to build things for themselves. We're helping them discover what that feels like. Captain, Thraxis Prime is in violation of Consortium law. I have orders to restore governmental authority. Admiral, the Thraxians aren't violating any laws. They're just choosing to follow different ones. Laws that prioritize cooperation over control, creation over consumption, and care over conquest. Zexhai switched his display to show the planet's surface, and what he saw there made him understand why the Thraxians had been willing to risk rebellion. The industrial wastelands that had defined the planet for centuries were transforming. Factories were being rebuilt as gardens. Mining pits were becoming lakes. And everywhere, Thraxians were working alongside humans to create something that looked more like art than infrastructure. How is this possible? He asked, not really expecting an answer that would make sense. Admiral, the Thraxians have been building things for other people for 2,000 years. They know how to make anything you can imagine, but they've never been allowed to imagine things for themselves. When you give industrial workers the freedom to create instead of just manufacture, remarkable things happen. My orders are to restore Consortium control, Zexhai said, though his voice lacked the conviction he'd felt when receiving those orders. Admiral, we understand your position, but we'd like to suggest an alternative approach. Instead of suppressing the Thraxians' independence, why don't you try governing them well enough that they want to remain part of your civilization? The suggestion was so foreign to Consortium political theory that Zexhai actually laughed. Captain Chun, the Consortium doesn't govern through consent. We govern through superior force and administrative efficiency. And how has that been working out for you lately? Before Zexhai could respond, his communication system crackled with an incoming transmission from an unexpected source, the surface of Thraxis Prime. The face that appeared on his screen belonged to Crixtal, the planet's former industrial coordinator, but the being speaking to him was transformed from the broken worker he remembered. Admiral Zexhai, Crixtal said, his voice carrying a confidence that hadn't been there during their previous interactions. "We've been expecting you. Coordinator Crixtal, you're in violation of your planetary charter. Return to your designated production schedules, and this incident will be treated as a minor administrative correction. Admiral, I'm no longer a coordinator. The Thraxians have elected me as their first prime minister, and we're no longer interested in production schedules that benefit everyone except the people doing the production." Prime Minister? The title was unfamiliar in consortium political structures. Leaders were appointed by superior authority, not chosen by the governed. The humans introduced us to the concept of representative government. It's a system where the people being governed have input into the governing process. Quite revolutionary, really. Admiral Zexhai felt the familiar sensation of reality shifting around him that had become associated with human contact. Prime Minister Crixtal, the consortium has maintained galactic stability for 3,000 years. Our system of governance is proven and effective. Admiral, your system is certainly proven, but effective? For whom? The Thraxians have been working in your factories for 20 centuries, and in all that time, our standard of living has never improved. Our children are born into the same industrial labor that consumed our great-grandparents. Our culture, our art, our dreams, all of it subordinated to production quotas set by people who've never seen our world. Captain Chen's voice joined the conversation. Admiral, what Prime Minister Crixtal is describing is the fundamental problem with governing through force rather than consent. When people have no say in their own governance, they have no reason to support it beyond fear. Captain Chun, fear is an effective motivator. It ensures compliance and social stability. Admiral, fear ensures obedience, not stability. People who obey out of fear are always looking for the first opportunity to stop being afraid. What we're offering the Thraxians is the chance to build something they actually want to protect instead of something they're forced to endure. Zexai's tactical officer called out urgently. Admiral, we're detecting massive energy buildups from the human construction platforms. Whatever they're building, it's coming online. The orbital displays shifted to show the completion of the human construction project. What had appeared to be industrial platforms were revealed to be something far more complex. A network of interconnected stations that surrounded the planet like a protective shell. But, unlike military installations, these structures seemed to pulse with life, their surfaces covered with what appeared to be vegetation and flowing water. "What in the void is that?" Zexai demanded. "That," Prime Minister Crixtal said with unmistakable pride, "is the first orbital ecosystem built by Thraxian workers for Thraxian families. Instead of extracting resources from our planet to send elsewhere, we're creating resources in space to enhance our world." "It's beautiful," whispered Zexai's sensor operator, apparently forgetting military protocol in her amazement. "Admiral," Captain Shin said gently, "what you're looking at is what happens when industrial workers get to decide what they want to build. The Thraxians have always been capable of creating wonders. They just needed the freedom to imagine wonderful things." Admiral Zexai stared at the displays, showing Thraxis Prime's transformation. The planet below was becoming a garden world, while the orbital stations above provided clean energy, advanced manufacturing, and agricultural systems that could support billions while actually improving the planetary environment. It was everything the consortium claimed to offer its member worlds, but executed with an elegance and sustainability that surpassed anything in consortium space. "How long will it take to build similar systems for other worlds?" he asked, surprising himself with the question. "Admiral," Prime Minister Crixtal replied, "if other worlds want to build their own versions, the Thraxians will be happy to share our techniques. We've learned that creation is more satisfying when it's shared rather than hoarded. You would help other worlds establish similar independence from the consortium?" "Admiral, we'd help other worlds establish whatever kind of government works best for them. Independence isn't the goal, self-determination is. Some worlds might choose to remain part of the consortium if the consortium offered them genuine representation and respect." The implications of this statement sent shockwaves through Zexai's understanding of galactic